Have you ever watched someone show up 20 minutes early to everything and thought, who does that? Who arrives at the airport like they're being deployed? Who gets to the coffee shop before the chairs are fully awake? And maybe if you're that person, you've probably heard every version of the joke. Wow, you really didn't want to be late, huh? The event starts at 6, not now. Relax, nobody cares. But that's the funny part. People assume arriving early is just about being organized, responsible, maybe a little intense. Like it's a time management habit wearing sensible shoes. But psychologically, it's often much deeper than that. Because people who always arrive early are rarely just early. They are anticipating, they are calculating, they are emotionally preparing. Sometimes they are protecting themselves from chaos before chaos even has a chance to happen. And the strange thing is, from the outside, it can look like confidence, discipline, reliability. Meanwhile, on the inside, it might feel more like, if I leave enough margin, maybe I can finally breathe. That's what makes this so interesting. Being early seems like a small behavior, almost boring. But small behaviors are where personality likes to hide. Your brain leaves fingerprints on tiny things, the way you reply to texts, the way you sit in waiting rooms, the way you pack for a one-day trip like you're crossing the Atlantic in 1847. These habits are not random. They're little survival strategies, emotional preferences, and personality patterns in disguise. Think about the moment before you leave for somewhere important. Some people are brushing one shoe while holding toast in their mouth, hunting for keys like it's an escape room designed by chaos itself. Their nervous system somehow treats deadlines like a starting pistol. But early arrivers? Their stress starts much sooner. For them, the idea of cutting it close feels physically wrong, not inconvenient, not mildly annoying. Wrong. Their brain doesn't interpret "I'll get there just in time" as efficient. It interprets it as danger with a nice calendar invite. And that tells us something important. A lot of people who arrive early have a heightened sensitivity to uncertainty, not necessarily in a clinical sense, not always as anxiety in the dramatic movie version where violins start playing in the background, but in a very everyday human sense. They like to remove variables: traffic, parking, getting lost, social awkwardness, walking in late while everyone turns to stare like you've interrupted a royal ceremony. To some brains, that whole possibility is unbearable. So arriving early becomes a form of emotional engineering. It's not only about controlling time, it's about controlling exposure to embarrassment, tension, and unpredictability. In other words, early arrival is often less about the clock and more about the nervous system. And honestly, that makes a lot of sense. Your brain is constantly trying to answer one quiet question: how do I make this situation feel safer? For some people, safety looks like preparation, buffer, margin, space. They don't want to enter the room out of breath, disoriented, still mentally parking the car while someone asks for their name tag. They want a soft landing. They want to see the room before the room sees them. That part matters more than people realize, because many early arrivers are also highly observant people. They like to take in the environment first. They notice where people are sitting, what the mood is, who already knows each other, whether the host seems stressed, whether the lighting is weird, whether the door squeaks, whether there's a safe corner where they can exist like a dignified houseplant until conversation starts. This is not overthinking for no reason. It's social mapping. And some personalities do this automatically. If you're someone who arrives early, you may know this feeling exactly. Those extra few minutes are not dead time. They are adjustment time. You're not just waiting, you're calibrating. This can be especially true for people who grew up in unpredictable environments. When life feels chaotic early on, some people adapt by becoming masters of preparedness. If your childhood home was full of last-minute scrambling, tension, forgotten things, or adults who made lateness feel catastrophic, your brain may have learned a powerful lesson. Being ahead of time means being safe from blame, stress, or disorder. So later in life, you don't just prefer being early. You feel responsible for it. And that's the hidden emotional weight of this habit. What looks like punctuality can sometimes be a form of hyper-responsibility. A person silently thinking, "I do not want to inconvenience anyone. I do not want to be the reason something starts late. I do not want to make a bad impression. I do not want to create friction. There's often a deep social conscience there, a desire to respect people's time, a sensitivity to how one's actions affect the group. That's actually one reason early arrivers are often seen as dependable. Not because they're obsessed with schedules like some kind of human wristwatch, but because they tend to think relationally. They understand that time isn't just minutes. It's trust, it's mood, it's the invisible agreement between people that says, I'll show up when I said I would. Of course, like many strengths, this one has a shadow, because sometimes arriving early is thoughtful and grounded, and sometimes it's fear wearing a productivity costume. That's the part we don't talk about enough. There are people who arrive early because they are genuinely conscientious, and there are people who arrive early because the idea of being late triggers an outsized amount of shame, and sometimes those are the same person. That shame piece is powerful. For some people, lateness doesn't just mean lateness. It means disrespectful, irresponsible, messy, inconsiderate. Suddenly, a 5-minute delay feels like a moral failure. And when normal human hiccups happen, traffic, misplaced keys, the universe deciding today is the day every red light will become a personal enemy, the internal reaction can be way bigger than the actual event. Their body responds like they've ruined everything, even if objectively nothing terrible has happened. So arriving early becomes a way of staying ahead of shame, a preemptive strike against self-judgment. And if that sounds heavy, it can be, but it also reveals something kind of beautiful. Underneath the habit is often someone who cares deeply, someone who wants to be steady, someone who wants to honor commitments, reduce stress, and move through the world without creating harm. That's not a flaw. It just needs balance. Because here's where the psychology gets especially interesting. Early arrivers often love control, but not always in the domineering way people think. Not control over other people, control over transitions, over uncertainty, over their own internal state. They don't necessarily want to command the room. They want enough stability to enter it as themselves. There's a difference. Transitions are psychologically expensive. Leaving one mental space and entering another is not always smooth. Going from home mode to work mode, car mode to social mode, solitude mode to performance mode, that shift takes energy. People who arrive early may be unconsciously giving themselves time to cross that bridge. They're allowing their mind to catch up with their body. That's why sitting in the car for 3 minutes before going in can feel weirdly sacred. It's not procrastination. It's psychological customs control. And yes, sometimes it can be a little funny. Some early arrivers will absolutely reach a place 15 minutes ahead of schedule and then refuse to go in until it is socially acceptable, like they're undercover agents monitoring the entrance. Too early to enter, too late to leave. Just sitting there, half philosopher, half parking lot gargoyle. But even that reveals something important. They want timing to feel right, not just safe, but socially graceful. There's also a cultural layer here. In some families, communities, or professional environments, being early is strongly associated with respect, discipline, and character. You've probably heard some version of the saying, if you're on time, you're late, which is a terrifying sentence if you think about it for too long. But messages like that stick. They shape how people interpret their own behavior. A person may internalize early arrival not as a preference, but as a standard of worth. They feel good when they meet it and quietly guilty when they don't. Then there's personality. Certain traits make early arrival more likely. Conscientious people tend to plan ahead, value order, and follow through consistently. People who are more sensitive to stress may create time cushions to regulate discomfort. Introverts or socially cautious people may arrive early to avoid the emotional drama of entering a full room mid-conversation. Even perfectionistic people sometimes use punctuality as one of the few life areas they can keep neat, clean, and under control when everything else feels messy. So if you always arrive early, what does that mean about you? It might mean you value peace more than adrenaline. It might mean your brain likes spaciousness. It might mean you're thoughtful and observant and more affected by uncertainty than people realize. It might mean you learned somewhere along the way that preparedness equals safety. It might mean your care shows up in practical ways, not loud ones. Not everyone says, "I love you," by being emotionally poetic. Some people say it by showing up 10 minutes early and pretending that's normal. And maybe that's the part worth honoring. Not every coping strategy needs to be pathologized. Sometimes a habit is simply a habit that has served you well. Sometimes being early is your way of making life gentler on your own nervous system. There's wisdom in that. The goal isn't to turn every quirk into a problem, it's to understand what it's doing for you. At the same time, self-understanding gives you choices. If arriving early makes your life calmer, great. Keep your beautiful little buffer. Protect your peace. But if you notice that being early is less about calm and more about fear, more about avoiding shame, more about never allowing yourself to be human, then maybe there's room for compassion there too. Maybe your worth does not begin and end with perfect timing. Maybe being 5 minutes late once in a while does not turn you into a villain in the story of civilization. You are allowed to be reliable without being rigid, prepared without being panicked, thoughtful without carrying the whole emotional burden of the clock on your back like Atlas with a planner. And honestly, the people who always arrive early often have something this world badly needs. They bring steadiness, they bring intention, they bring a kind of quiet care that rarely gets celebrated because it looks so ordinary. But ordinary behaviors are often carrying extraordinary emotional intelligence. The person who gets there early may not just be managing time. They may be managing atmosphere, pressure, attention, and internal noise, all before anyone else has even found parking. So the next time you notice someone arrive early or realize that person is you, maybe don't reduce it to they're just punctual. Look a little deeper. There might be sensitivity there. There might be history. There might be discipline. There might be anxiety. There might be kindness. Usually, it's a mix. Human behavior is almost never one thing. That's what makes psychology so fascinating. The smallest habit can open a door into the whole architecture of a person. And if you see yourself in this, maybe reflect on it. When you arrive early, what are you really arriving ahead of? Stress? Judgment? Chaos? Embarrassment? Or maybe you're arriving early for something gentler, a moment to settle, a breath before the world begins. A chance to meet life without rushing into it. And in a culture that is constantly sprinting, maybe that's not such a strange thing after all. If this made you think about your own habits in a new way, let me know what kind of person you are. Are you the one standing outside the venue 20 minutes early, pretending you were just in the area? Or are you the one running in with one sock emotionally untied? Either way, there's psychology in it. And if you want to keep exploring the strange, beautiful reasons we do what we do, stay curious, stay kind to your mind, and stick around for the next one.